You've heard of the CasiOak, right? That octagonal G-Shock which is often hailed as the best budget AP alternative? Well, I also saw several videos about that model on YouTube, safe in the knowledge that this CasiOak would have little chance of fitting on my slim wrist. Yet, over 45mm wide, the GA2100 even outmuscles the very largest Royal Oak models, despite being one of the more wearable G-Shocks with its reconfigured lugs. So I began hunting for a different Royal Oak alternative, and what I found is potentially a better one altogether, or at least one that's more similar. As the title implies, I didn't have to look too far, as the watch in question is surprisingly still a Casio, despite me not having previously heard of it. Introducing the Casio Edifice EFR-S108D, which I'm labelling as the new CasiOak, or CasiOak Killer, whichever sounds more clickbaity. I bought this one with my own money, and it's currently retailing for around £100, though it's often available for closer to £80. Right out of the box, you can see why I chose this one. There's no mod kit required here, with the styling of the steel case already making it obvious that the design team were heavily inspired by the Royal Oak when dreaming up this model. As you can see though, it's by no means a one-to-one clone, as with some lesser known brands on the market. So let's talk through the similarities, differences, and why I think this watch is just so darn good. Where else to start but the sizing? After all, that's my main objection with the GA2100. While it's a fantastic durable watch and not the largest G-Shock out there, it's certainly still not the most discreet. This Edifice, on the other hand, is notably smaller and much sleeker. It comes in with a 38mm width, which is boosted to just shy of 40mm when you're including those side bulges. It's also very thin at just 8mm in depth. The on-wrist lug-to-lug size is effectively 50mm, as the proprietary end links are fixed in place, though they are angled steeply enough to follow the natural contours of the arm, meaning skinny wrists should be fine in most cases. Here's a look at it on my 15.5cm wrist. It still sits very nicely without any overhang, and is nearly flush to the wrist, which is a nice asset. If your wrist is still considerably smaller than mine, then you could have a bit of an issue with the lug-to-lug size. The case of the watch is constructed from the ever-present 316L stainless steel, which is presented in the vertically brushed finish that Royal Oak aficionados will be familiar with. The overall angular shape is certainly reminiscent of some of the APs of yesteryear, though the aforementioned protrusions on each flank may be a subtle nod to the Patek Philippe Nautilus. While the octagonal fixed bezel is certainly inspired by the Royal Oak, especially with the polished extremities, the famous screws have been shifted to the top of the lugs instead, with one present in each corner. I've been consistently impressed with the level of finishing on these Edifice watches, and this EFR-S108D is no exception. The brushing is quite well done, and there's a slim, precise chamfered edge down each side, contributing to an overall look that rivals some watches at about double this price point. Obviously, when it comes to finishing, it's not going to compare to the watches it's been inspired by, but I think it looks great nonetheless. As you probably guessed, given the sheer slimness, this watch does use a quartz movement, which is hardly class-leading. The unit in this Edifice is well aligned though, hitting or skimming each of the markers as it moves its way around the chapter ring, and the case rear does have a good enough seal to provide a very respectable 100 meters of water resistance. Given the sporty aesthetic, you'd hope this watch could survive contact with water, and thankfully this rating should have you covered in almost all situations, including swimming. The watch also houses an integrated bracelet like the original, though with more mainstream styling. Unfortunately, the links aren't solid, utilising an unusual type of folded link system that we've seen on previous Casios, which keeps the folds concealed, which makes them look like solid links on the surface. While better than the hair-ripping bracelets on budget Casio offerings, it's still disappointing considering many rivals have solid links at this price point. The 3-step micro-adjustment clasp is serviceable though, and it should allow you to find a comfortable fit. What's not disappointing is the crystal choice. Casio didn't cut any corners here, and opted for a piece of sapphire for awesome scratch resistance, beating out the mineral glass featured on the most overhyped fashion watches out there, and even some of the other Edifice models. While the dial lacks the digital segment found on the GA2100, it's still not a true copy of the Royal Oak, with a dark, vertically grained effect that looks halfway between wood and carbon. This watch is also available in a white dial version, should that be more to your taste. The handset and markers are also much chunkier, but the watch does maintain a similarly clean look, with the date window also at the 3 o'clock position. The wheel is also black, which integrates seamlessly with the dial, something often not found on low-cost watches like this. For a touch of colour, the second hand is presented in a glossy gold tone, which matches that of the sapphire text above the 6 o'clock position. There's also a reference to the water resistance, but thankfully, no battery life or quartz stamp as seen on previous Casios. Of course, there's the somewhat divisive Edifice logo, which also appears on the crown. Honestly, I'm not that fussed by it, but I'll leave that decision to you. The EFR-S108D also has luminescence spread across the markers and hands, and while it works, it's quite weak. I guess something is better than nothing though, eh? When on wrist, this watch feels comfortable and looks surprisingly good, being much closer to the real look aesthetic than the old CasiOak. It also carries over some of that versatility, as this Edifice looks great both casually and when dressed up, and you've also got that more modest sizing. For some of you, it may be worth checking out the EFR-S107L, which is incredibly similar but with a larger size of 41mm and a slightly different bezel configuration. That model also has traditional lugs, so if you're after a Royal Oak style watch that you can chuck a strap on, that's the route to go down. Though, given the octagonal bezel, I do think the S108D is going to be the first choice for most of you watching. Both options sidestep the need for the metal mod kit too, which will save you some cash, though neither boast the same impact resistance as the G-Shock obviously. I'll link all three in the video description. Which of these CasiOaks do you prefer? Let me know in the comments section, subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.